Bro, so far, IEM Cologne is living up to the billing as one of the best events of the year, and today might have been its greatest day so far. Not only were there so many intense grudge matches, people fiending to avoid elimination, players scrapping to advance straight to the semifinals, there were just so many good narratives. Underdogs like Saul and Pain trying to validate themselves on a world stage, Liquid taking on Complexity, the battle for North America, trying to re-establish the region as a threat in Tier 1, you have G2 continuing their monstrous run of form, NAVI playing at a level that's far beyond even what they showed us when they won the major, Vitality besting a much more consistent MOUZ, and then at the end of it all, an epic 3-game grudge match between Faze and Liquid, the Master versus the Student, Twist versus Kerrigan, fighting to the very bitter end for the last playoff spot, and one of the craziest 2-map sequences that I've gone to watch ever in Counter-Strike. There was truly so much stuff to get into that cutting down to just the important stuff took me a lot of time and a lot of effort. So I'm not going to waste your guys' time either. This is probably going to end up being a longer video. All I ask before we get started is that you guys leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and that you consider becoming a channel member to support me directly in what we do here. And lastly, check me out on Twitch, linked in the description down below, and hopefully you guys will drop by, show some love, and we could talk about Cologne along the way. Without any further ado, let's open things up with the great battle for North America. And now listen here, fellers, it is tough as a true red-blooded patriot to watch these two North American heroes battle it out in the Thunderdome. Having to see one of them's go home over the other truly hurts my heart. And unfortunately, despite what would happen later on, it just seems like Complexity weren't able to bring their best game against Liquid today. I would say throughout the first half on Ancient, it looked like it was actually going to be a very exciting and close series, but as Liquid went on their run to dominate the second half on the CT side, it just seemed like Complexity was outclassed. I think the coordination, the fragging, the tactics, all of it was done better by Team Liquid this time. On this opening map, LionHearTZ leads the way with 20 kills, he's getting wonderful impact, but it's simply not enough, and Liquid were doing a great job, especially down the stretch of the second half, of avoiding LionHearTZ taking huge multi-kills and a lot of space. And when Complexity can't get that space, they tend to grind to a halt and not know what to do. That's when they fall back on relying on brilliance from Halls or Grim or even JT or Floppy. And JT especially had been doing really great as an individual in this tournament. He had many clutches in previous series, great impact with the rifle up and down, all while calling great tactics. But here, the game plans that Complexity were setting up were good, but JT himself had his worst individual performance of the tournament, and it definitely came at the worst time. And consider just how close this game was when Ultimate, who has been the best player on Liquid to this point, is totally not there on Ancient. He ends up with 9 kills and 16 deaths, and Complexity weren't able to exploit that and let Liquid control the back half of this game, winning 9 of 10 rounds on their CT side to close it out. And yeah, I don't know much else to say here because Complexity, they just faded away at this point. We pull up to Anubis and it's 13-5 in favor of Team Liquid, and Complexity don't feel like they have anything going for them. No momentum, there's no intensity, there's no vibes, there's nothing that seems like the team wants to push and fight against elimination after a certain point. Even after such a standout moment like Grim getting that 1v3 clutch early on their T side, that didn't like spark a great run of momentum, and like 2 rounds later Ultimate gets an ace, and feels like after that point, Complexity, they capitulate, they fall apart. Liquid runs them over to end the half, and the last place you want to be in Counter-Strike is trying to mount a comeback on the CT side of Anubis. It's hard enough just to stay afloat when you have to play CT side, but to make a comeback against Liquid, who are already playing better than you, and avoid elimination, it's just too much, man. Liquid stays alive to play the winner of Falcon versus Faze Clan. Complexity, they exit Cologne in a weird place. Something we'll definitely be talking about in another video, but Complexity, it's so hard to gauge where this team is at. It feels like it just needs a change, if nothing else, just for the sake of trying something new at this point. Next up, we have the Falcons taking on Faze Clan, also in an elimination match to stay alive. And honestly, Falcons did a lot better in this series than I would have given them credit for. On Dust 2, things were extremely close. Falcons fought back late on their CT side to force an overtime. But as we are going to talk about much more later on, if you're going to strike at Faze, you better go for the head, because much like Thanos, you're not going to get a second shot. Because Faze were dominant in the overtime to take the first map, and when we moved to Ancient, Faze did not waste any time putting the work on these boys. I mean, some of these overtime rounds were just simply clean and perfect from Faze. Like here on round 26, Faze is going to suffocate Falcons for map control. They're going to not let them go anywhere. Hold them in the back of CT mid, hold them out of long, hold them in B, and waste clock. Just occasionally throw some smokes, throw some flashes, a couple of shots through the doors, so the Falcons have to focus on mid, but they can't overcommit on the map control. They have to wait and react to what Faze are doing. And once the time's gone down, we're getting down to 30 seconds, Faze are just going to bend it into tunnels. They're going to throw all the utility, door, window, counter flashes, Molotovs. Kerrigan's going to entry straight through the smoke tunnels onto the site, and Faze are just going to trade for site control. Perfect. Brokey follows up Kerrigan with 2 picks of his own. Kerrigan's the only person to die, and the remaining Falcons players just have to save right away. There's not even a glimpse at a retake. Just perfect protocols. And moving on to Ancient, I'm not really going to yank your guys' chain here. There's nothing to talk about. Faze were dominant. It's a 13-6 victory. One thing to note, and we'll definitely be touching on this more later on, Rops had a great series. He had a great game here, led with 20 kills. Rops is on a bit of a redemption arc right now, and it's something to keep an eye out on, because I and many others were definitely feeling down on Rops. His turn of form lately had not been the greatest, and a lot of times in the Faze losses, he was having some real ugly games. But here, he's been strong, he's been the guy when Faze needed him, and later on against Liquid, he was definitely that guy. This is the end of the road for the Falcons, and listen, I'm definitely not high on this team, but I do have to recognize they've been giving good teams like really close games, but they've not been able to turn them around. They're not really threatening upsets right now. What they're threatening is to push you 10 or 11 rounds and make you sweat it out, but if you're the better team, you're still going to end up winning. I don't know what the Falcons need to change, but it really feels like they lack just a little bit of oomph, a little something. I don't know, maybe it's like a blame F from Fnatic, just someone who complements Magisk and Sampayas and can put up big numbers when those two have bad games. I don't really know out of Dupree or Madden who you replace with that kind of player, but surely this roster has shown like what the top end looks like, and it's not good enough for how expensive it is and how much money this organization is clearly willing to throw around. Moving on, we have the first of 2 very quick series to go over. We have G2 taking on Pain Gaming. And unfortunately for Pain Gaming, despite how well they've looked throughout this tournament, despite all the hope they continue to inspire in all of us, they've ran into a brick wall here. I don't think there was any shot they were going to upset G2 unless an absolute miracle happened. And G2 didn't even give them a chance for the miracle to ferment. It was 13-6 on the first map, it was 13-1 on the second. G2 continued to steamroll everybody who isn't named Saw Gaming. And it definitely sucks, but I just want to say now and have it on the record. Pain, you guys for me are now 100% the best team in Brazil. I think you guys have shown incredible form in your recent runs, and I think you guys are only getting better. Big Azera continues to be someone who has established himself as a world-class IGL, and everyone else has stepped up in big ways on this team. Lux, NQZ, Cowez, you guys have all had your moments to shine. And when you consider just how centralized Brazil has felt since Fallen and coldzera originally took over, I mean, for a long time, Brazil's presence in World Counter-Strike was just those guys. And then Furia came along and that shook things up. But even then, once you got beyond those 2 teams, things fell off really quickly. But now we're in the new era. It feels like the new regime is rising up before us. And as the Brazilian scene continues to get younger, sharper, faster, more adaptive to World Counter-Strike, I think you guys are poised to lead the way into the next top Brazilian teams. As for G2, they continue to overwhelm all of the opponents that are definitely below them, and surprisingly, they did it against Spirit as well. The problem is, what's going to happen to this team when the fragging output is just average? What are they going to do when Nico or m0NESY have a quiet game together and they have to rely on their tactics and their team play? Because it's very clear that Snax is not an in-depth in-game leader. I think Astralis and Mirage expose a lot of holes in their calling. Looking ahead, I could see a team like MOUZ beating G2, Vitality, NAVI as well. The projection for G2 seems so high, like I could see them dominating the rest of this tournament and winning. I could see them bombing out in the first set of playoff games. It's really hard to project. Moving on to our other underdog story, we have Saw Gaming taking on NAVI. And despite being the talk of this tournament and one of the biggest narratives coming out of Cologne, Saw finally hit the limit. Unfortunately for them, NAVI are establishing themselves as the consensus #1 team in the world, and they seem to only be getting better. SAW have pulled off miracles to make it to where they are right now, but asking them to overcome NAVI might have just simply been too much for the task. Despite that, NAVI is one of the best nuke teams in the world, and SAW beat them on nuke 13-9. They beat NAVI on nuke decisively before NAVI woke up and crushed them on the other two maps. But listen, we're looking at the upside here. This nuke game is what we're going to talk about, because the other two maps, they're blowouts. There's not much to get into. But on nuke, navigating around Alexi B and out-calling him is legitimately something that should be praised, and SAW once again pilot an effective, amazing, and clinical T-side to run circles around NAVI CT defense. Now, it certainly wasn't perfect because they faced a lot of early adversity. On round 6, they had to absorb an eco round loss to NAVI, and it wasn't even some tactical masterclass here. NAVI just won the duel straight up and took SAW gaming out one at a time. And this is definitely a pivotal point. SAW can afford to buy into this round, but it's not going to be a full buy, and if they lose here, they're going to have to save. So losing that eco could turn into a quick 3-round advantage for NAVI instead of 1 if they don't get this round back. And with zero hesitation, SAW just go for the full-fledged A push. They're going to push out Squeaky and Hunt, the standard stuff, smokes, nades, flashes. Arados is going to go in for the hero sacrifice with the Mag-10, take a pick for himself. Uger is going to trade him out on site as well as find another one in heaven. Meanwhile, Story is going to launch straight into Mini through the smoke to get the Mini player caught unawares before he peeks back out and finds a second pick into heaven. Wonderful at that point is wondering, well, what the hell happened to my team? And is now forced into a save situation. No kit, no money, wants to keep the op. There's no way in hell he's going to attempt this 1v3. And just immaculate pace control from SAW here. Instead of allowing NAVI to build positive momentum off of the eco win, they go real fast to catch them off guard and steal it right back. In the very next round, I think SAW show off some great mid-round decision making. They're going to open up with a very similar look. They're going to blow open Squeaky, throw some nades onto A, and bait out some early responses from NAVI. Bit, looking to make some damage with the MP9, is going to push through the ramp smoke. Unfortunately, Ujerks is watching it all the way. Bit gets a little too aggressive for my liking here, goes down early, and that's a huge benefit to SAW. Wonderful was going to lurk into the hut with the op in his hands looking for a pick and intel, and after waiting around for a little while, he is going to get that pick. Now if we pause here, there's an interesting decision tree for what SAW could do. They know that Wonderful is in hut, he's in a vulnerable position. They could push out and chase him onto upper. They could also move around outside because they know the op's not going to be there. They could also instead go ramp, knowing that he can't be held to help defend the ramp player if they run into one. So, instead of chasing Wonderful, which is a trap because there's players in Mini, so SAW make the correct read and haul ass straight for the lower bomb site. The good thing about this is Mutiras is lurking through lobby. And as Alexi B and JL clear ramp to start working on the post plant, Mutiras can play spoiler, get a pick, and slow JL down. Meanwhile, Udrix fighting by the vent is going to take 2 more picks because he's playing like a monster right now, and just such a great round from SAW. The mid-rounding here was perfect, just running circles around NAVI. So yeah, man, I think overall SAW should be walking away from this game really happy. It sucks you couldn't capture a semifinals appearance, but you guys are in the playoffs and everyone's looking at you for the first time since the major. So honestly, that's a win. Moving on to our penultimate series of the day, we had Vitality taking on MOUZ. And I think this was definitely a match that had potential to be like a truly classic set. Unfortunately, MOUZ ran into a buzzsaw on Dust 2 to the tune of Vitality having a 12-0 T-half to open up the series. And yeah, that's kind of a tough thing to overcome, it turns out. I know that this may surprise you considering what we're going to talk about later on, but usually if you win more than 10 rounds on your first half, you're going to win that game. I mean, MOUZ, they did their best to run up 6 rounds just to kind of make it kind of like a pity loss, but dude, Vitality were unstoppable on the T side. Once again, as I've reiterated many times already, you don't fight the French on Dust 2. Like, you're picking Dust 2 into the Baguette battalions. Like, it's just not something you need to do. It's just asking for trouble. When we move to Vertigo, it's a much more interesting game. Both teams really excelled at their T-side executes, and in the end, MOUZ were able to force overtime, but Vitality were absolutely unstoppable in the overtime, winning 4 of 5 rounds to win out the map and the series 16-13. But how we got there was definitely more interesting. This game definitely had the potential to be basically a gentleman's sweep at one point because during the second half, Vitality ended up at match point after a 5-run streak that left the score at 12-9, and when you consider that MOUZ are already down, they already got beat up on Dust 2, what do they have to do to lock it in and potentially push this game to a map 3? Well, it's 3 rounds of very clinical CT side defense to deny any possible plan from Vitality. If the bomb goes down, the odds of them winning that round go way up, so it's so paramount for them to control the bomb sites. Like here on match point where they're trying to get to overtime and they just decided to bunker down. They're playing 2 on B, 2 on A, and just 1 in mid for intel, and they're not going to move at all for basically the entire round. We're just going to sit here and watch Xerxin and Jimmy P hold this down because eventually Vitality are going to bend this into a late B take. Jimmy P is going to get an incredible triple kill, Xerxin is going to get one for his own, and Mezzi's left in a 1v5. And fair play to Mezzi, he takes 3 quality kills on the way out the door, so he makes it a little bit interesting. But just, I love the patience here, because I think it's so easy in this situation when you're just desperate to keep the map alive, especially when you haven't gotten any positive intel from the enemy except you got some trade of utility at A, that people want to push, they want to explore, they want to find something, a tail, a flank, a timing, to try and get that advantage. But MOUZ, like it or not, they are a really good system team, and part of that system is reliance on each other, so they just calmly play the sites, let Vitality walk into the trap, and they execute it perfectly to push it to overtime. Unfortunately, they couldn't give it over the line as we talked about, but some of these rounds they looked really good. If Dust 2 goes any differently, I think this looks like a much more competitive series. Losing here isn't the biggest deal to me. Yes, it would be absolutely nice to skip straight to the semifinals and play one less series, but you're still in the playoffs, you're not facing elimination here. If there was ever a time for MOUZ to have a bad series, it was now. You have 2 days to prep, you take on G2, and you give it your best shot then. And now, for the section you have all been waiting for. Everything up until this point has been set dressing for this. The most interesting series of the day, one of the best series in recent memory, the Master and the Student. Faze versus Liquid. Winner goes on, loser goes home. And what an interesting spot to be for both of these teams. Coming into this, Liquid on an upward trajectory. They've shown out so much so far with this new lineup. Faze Clan, they've been slipping, been so inconsistent these last few months. A lot of doubt going around. Is this the end of the roster? Is it time for change? Can Kerrigan keep going? And now we're here for a spot in the Cathedral of Counter-Strike, a tournament Faze consistently show up and do well in, a tournament they have won multiple times. And man, this series delivered as a raw entertainment product. Before we go any further, if you have not watched this series, please stop. Go watch it yourself. It's so worth your time. It had me on the edge of my seat. It was so entertaining down the stretch. Just so much fun to watch it live. Now, there is simply too much to get into about this 3-game set. So with that, we're going to be skipping Inferno. All I will say is that Faze won at 13-9 and put Liquid on the back foot early. Some narratives to keep an eye out on. Ultimate struggled very much. His worst game of the tournament by far, 6 for 16. Twist was immaculate, 19 kills, a 1.36 rating. Frozen was Faze's best player by a country mile, 23 kills, a 1.59 rating, 100 ADR, and this will not be the last time we talk about Frozen in this video. Let's go ahead and talk about Nuke, because Nuke was incredible. At one point, it looked like Faze had it all but secured. They were going to 2-0 Liquid all the time. Frozen on the CT side was a heartbreaker. So many incredible rounds where Frozen was just overwhelming. Frozen had 20 CT second half kills. He ended the game with 26 total. He was the main reason that Faze was being so successful. Frozen had 2 incredible standout rounds, one we will talk about in just a little bit, but obviously to force match point, it's 11-9. Liquid are controlling the outside entirely. The picks are going their way. NAF gets a lurk pick in Squeaky. And with 20 seconds left, Liquid are storming the bomb site to get the bomb down. JKS pushes into HUD where Frozen has been camping out. Frozen takes the JKS pick. And then he starts playing with NAFLI. Jiggle peeking, throwing off the timing. The Molotov is so perfect because it just throws off what little composure Team Liquid have because they have to get the bomb down. There's not enough time. Frozen picks off NAFLI. The smoke goes down to cover the bomb. Ultimate has to jump it to try and get the plan off. Robs is in heaven. He's going to take care of Yukindar. And with the USP, Frozen puts Liquid on ice and gives a 12th round to Faze. Just an incredible play that I think every other time except for this series would have just been an immediate win for Faze. I don't know how Liquid recovered from this, but whatever it was Liquid magic because in the very next round, it looks like it's over, man. Liquid spends so much time trying to get map control outside, and eventually, we're talking over a minute into the round, we're getting close to 40 seconds left. Kerrigan with the IGL and IGL crime takes out Twist. Rain gets Yakindar not that long after, and now there's 30 seconds on the clock. Ultimate, NAF, and JKS, they have so little time, so little resources, but they have the bomb in hand. They make the push into ramp. JKS and Ultimate find absolute glory taking out Rops and Brokey, and suddenly there's a chance they dive downstairs to get the bomb down. But Frozen is already here, ready to play spoiler once again, but JKS jumps through the control window, gets the important pick there so that the bomb could go down. And then it's NAV flying the rafters, Ultimate down on site, they get all the picks. A 3v5 round that should never have happened, but it came down to Liquid individual excellence, a bit of positional error in the ramp by Faze, but the game goes on. And Liquid hold it down, they grind this back, 3 wins in a row to force overtime, off the backs of Ultimate and Twist playing off each other, NAV fly getting picks, Yakindar finding space, everything working on all cylinders, and in the overtime, Liquid flipped the switch, especially when we get back to the CT side. Ultimate turns into a monster, multi-killing everywhere. He goes from being kind of an also-ran in this game to being so clutch at the very end. He ends with 32 kills, the new kid on the block, looking so comfortable in the toughest situations. And Liquid, they take a map back. We're going to Mirage. And I don't think anybody, not even the most psychotic Liquid fan, could have predicted how this map played out. Even several hours later, I find how this map played out so confusing to think about, because I don't think anyone would have expected Faze to be able to mount a comeback like we saw today. The opening half for Liquid was 11 rounds to 1 round from Faze. They won 8 straight to close out the CT half. And at that point, it should be GG. Faze should be going home. We should be talking about the great Liquid upset. Twist has beaten his old team, his mentor as an IGL. That's everything that we should be focusing on. But somehow, Faze defied all the odds. And listen, they got 5 rounds. I was like, there's no way in hell that Liquid are going to choke this. Liquid got their match point on the 3rd round of the half. And I was like, sure, there's no way that Liquid are going to choke this. Even when Faze had 10 rounds in the half, I was like, okay, no problem. Liquid, they're going to get one. There's no shot that this is going overtime. But here's the thing, right? I've said this in a few recent videos, but there is nothing more dangerous than when people assume that Faze is the underdog. When people forget who this Faze team are, who these players are, when they get written off, that's when Faze reminds you why they've been one of the best teams in Counter-Strike for years. Not only did the Faze boys play a perfect half of CT Counter-Strike, Rops was insane. 27 kills for the game, 17 on the second half. Every other Faze player had single-digit kills going into the second half. They ended the game with double-digit CT kills. All of them. Now, it certainly takes 2 to tango, and it's gotta be said. As incredible and free-flowing and dominant as Liquid were on their CT side, their T side was absent, it was simplistic, it was very clear that they ran out of ideas and were too intimidated to try anything they weren't comfortable doing. Over and over, there were several rounds where they didn't even attempt anything close to a site execute, and when they did, they got picked apart. It's very clear that at a certain point, Liquid were trying to force a miracle, and it just never came. And when we got to overtime, yeah, they won the first round of overtime. It looked a little bit like the Liquid we had saw dominate not that long before. But then, Faze locked it in. The rest of their CT overtime, immaculate. Their only 2 T rounds, unstoppable. And this went from an 11-1 half to a 16-13 playoff clinching win for Faze Clan. Now, this is a heartbreaking loss for Liquid. There's no way around that, and the Liquid choke meme is alive and well, because Liquid should be in the playoffs. There is nothing I can say that defends the Liquid performance on the back half of this map. This game was won 9 times out of 10, and Liquid rolled the natural one, and en masse, every single player collectively shit their pants. But I'm going to go on a limb here and say that this might be the best thing that happens to this Liquid roster, because it shows what they need to work on. It's very clear how much room Twist needs to grow as an IGL, and the early success had to come with a price at some point. Ultimate has been incredibly aggressive throughout this event, one of the best performing players of Cologne so far, but when his aggression got away from him and he started pushing and dying early, it's clear that someone needed to be able to rein him in, and he wasn't able to check down and play safe down the stretch. Had he done that, it might be a very different story. Liquid are going to go home, they'll lick their wounds, and look at this game very closely, and I think it'll be a great learning opportunity for them to evolve into a much better team. I was not very confident in this Liquid roster before IEM Cologne, but I am exiting this tournament confident that this team will break into the top 10 within the next few events. I think they are that good. For FaZe Clan, I don't know, man. It says a lot about the character of this team that they could be so middling for their last few events and be able to grind back a win like this when everyone was doubting what they were able to do. Robs was excellent. He's been way better in this tournament. Rain had great impact. Kerrigan was better as an individual. And to everyone else remaining in the field, it's time to look out, because FaZe are in their favorite spot, and they're ready to make a run at the crown when they enter into the Cathedral later this week. Alright, I'm going to keep things brief for the outro because I am very tired. Once again, I want to thank you guys for all the support lately. Things have been pretty difficult on the channel for the last 48 hours, but like I said, things aren't slowing down in terms of the content. We'll be back on Friday to cover the first round of playoff games. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps out immensely in the YouTube algorithm. Shout out to Advanced GG, they power these videos. Check out my link in the description down below. If you use my code LionHeartZ at checkout, you get 10% off, and lets them know I sent you their way. Lastly, shout out to my channel members, Justin, Jesse, Furley, Bubblesj, Dr. Cocktor for keeping the lights on. You can support me directly by becoming a channel member. Check the link in the description down below. Follow me on Twitch, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys soon with another video. Peace.